All right, welcome to Stingrays. Who are you going to call? Hopefully not the Ghostbusters, because they're not going to do much for you. So, welcome. Hopefully not too hungover this morning. I know it's a little early for a Saturday, so thank you all for coming here. Who am I? My name's Michael Raymond. I'm Virtual Chief Information Security Officer for my day job. I got a little bit of the alphabet soup going on, just not that much CISM for those of you counting. Been in cybersecurity for the past 10 years or so. And those of you that spend way too much time on YouTube may recognize me. I've been in a couple of videos on Nullbyte, Security Forward, Hack5. If you do recognize me, go out and touch some grass because you spend way too much time inside. So what I like to do in my free time, I'm a mountaineer. That's how I get out and get away from the computers, but also have a lot of interest in cybersecurity, particularly around privacy and surveillance, as well as home automation and other things. So let me start off with a question here. You got this big, beautiful cop car following you around all the time. You see the cop in there jotting down notes, noting down who you're talking to, how long you're talking to them, where you're going, what you're doing. Would that make you comfortable? Is that something you'd be happy with? No. I don't see a lot of liveliness. So unfortunately, there is a technology which allows the police to do that, and it's not even as overt as a police car, following you around. So just quick show of hands. If I say the word Stingray, does that mean anything to you already? Okay. And who of you have used a Stingray? Good. No one tattling on themselves. All right, so one of the beautiful things about the topic I'm going to talk about today is that there are so many different words used to describe the exact same technology. So I want to try to disambiguous it a little. So when we say Stingray, that's referring to a specific product, but in the same way that Kleenex has become synonymous with tissue paper, Stingray has become synonymous with cell site simulator. But this lovely device, product made for better part of a decade, maybe 20 or so years ago by, I believe, the Harris Corporation. But there's also more modern versions, like this super fancy SUV, which has a built-in cell site simulator in it. You can also hear them referred to as rogue cell towers, or, because we need even more words for it, femtocells. If you're familiar with Mr. Robot, you might have seen femtocell used there. But essentially, all of these things, all of these words, while they do have some minutiae, some differences in there, for the purposes of this conversation, they're really all referring to that same thing. Everything falls under that umbrella of a cell site simulator. So how many of y'all are familiar with a Wi-Fi pineapple? Everyone? Okay. So if you want to think of a cell site simulator as a Wi-Fi pineapple, but for cellular, that wouldn't be too far off the mark. It's essentially that. Basically, it's a physical device which is capable of performing a man-in-the-middle attack on cellular radio frequencies and cellular radio protocols. So obviously, having a device between you and the internet, or a device in the middle of your conversation with your friend, probably a suboptimal place to be in. So what exactly would the impact of having a man-in-the-middle attack on your cell phone conversations be like? Well, first thing is, since this is a physical device that are put in a geographic location, then it enables dragnet surveillance. It's not usually specifically targeted at one device. So anyone walking within proximity of that rogue cell tower, that cell site simulator, is immediately getting surveilled by this device. And additionally, those devices, those cell site simulators, one of the key ingredients that they're collecting is something called the IMSI number. Easy way to think about this is the license plate number for your car. It's a unique identifier associated with each of your individual cellular devices. So by entering, say, this building, if I had a cell site simulator here, then I would know you're here in this building, which gives me a rough location. And then I also would have your IMSI number, which I can then use to perform other attacks. Say, if I were police and trying to surveil you, then I could take that IMSI number, go to someone like your cell phone provider and say, hey, I got this device, give me all the information you have on it. So it's a very, very powerful piece of information. Now, don't confuse that with the IMEI number, which is the unique identifier for your cellular hardware. You can think of that like the VIN number on your car. It's a number that doesn't change, whereas the IMSI is a mobile subscriber identity number, which does change when you change carriers, when you change SIM cards, etc. So they're likely also able to detect metadata. I was talking about in the police car metaphor, because these cell towers need to route information, there's very high-level information that's easily available to any cell tower, such as who you're trying to call, because they have to direct that call some way. Additionally, by just analyzing how long that data is going back and forth, you can say, okay, well, Michael called Bob for 5 minutes versus 5 seconds versus 5 hours. And again, as I mentioned, because you have to be within physical proximity of these cell towers, at a minimum, they know your geographic location to within a couple hundred yards. Now, we get into some of the attacks that are theoretically possible, but far less likely to be performed by these cell site simulators. The first is a denial of service attack. Denial of service attack, essentially the way that works on a high level is your phone's asking, hey, I need service, please connect me. And these rogue cell towers are like, sorry, we don't really have any service for you. And you know what, actually, we don't think there's any service around here for you at all. So you might as well just give up and stop looking. And your phone is like, oh, shucks, I guess I just will stop looking for service around here because there's nothing for me. And so your phone just inherently trusts that cell tower isn't lying to it. And so it effectively is denied service until it's rebooted. Now, the other attack that can be performed as well is a 2G downgrade attack. So as you may be familiar with the generations of cellular technology, 2G is very old at this point. You got 2G, 3G, 4G, LTE, 5G, etc. So 2G is encrypted, but it might as well not be encrypted. Encryption is so broken at this point that it can be decrypted in real time by modern technology. So effectively, if they were able to, again, similar to the attack above with the denial of service, that inherent trust of the cell tower, your phone's looking for whatever service it can get. And this lovely, helpful rogue cell tower is, like, hey, I'm sorry, buddy, but the only service I got for you is some 2G service. Would you like some 2G service? And your phone's like, yeah, I'll take that 2G service. So if your phone has 2G service enabled, that's one of the ways they can downgrade you. And then, again, as I was talking about, with the encryption being so bad on that, that's where they can start doing things like actively listening to the phone call. They can read your text, again, in real time, not just like storing it and decrypting it later. Then they also get access to any data that would be going back and forth over that 2G network. So, if you're visiting websites, if you're sending out DNS requests, they would be able to see those websites you're going to. And also, again, going back to the metaphor of the Wi-Fi pineapple, attacks that you could perform on that. Similarly, you could potentially perform with a rogue cell tower. So, redirect people to other websites, steal session tokens, etc. Anything that isn't already encrypted in another layer. Now, what is unlikely is that over radio frequency, they are able to persistently hack your cell phone, your radio modem, in a way that lingers after you leave the physical proximity of the cell site simulator. So, luckily, or unluckily, I guess, depending on your perspective, is that when you're walking into the proximity of these cell site simulators, these things I said likely, maybe happen, but then you leave and the damage is done, and you can go on with your life from there. It's unlikely unless you're a nation state leader or terrorist cell leader who's playing around with weapons of mass destruction that there is going to be any kind of zero-day exploit or anything like that targeted against you specifically that would exploit your phone on a persistent basis. So luckily, as long as you can flee from these devices, you're pretty safe. Now, I know I went over all of that on a very high level, so I know some of the nerdy people in the room will want some of the details on specifically how that works, what packets need to get sent, etc. So if you look up this article on the EFF website, Gotta Catch 'Em All, that goes into the excruciating detail of how each of these attacks work on a very technical level. Also, lots of jargon in there, so I hope you have fun with that. So, that's all lovely theoretical information, but how does this affect me in real life on an everyday basis? So, you may have seen an article, something like this in news recently. Anyone hear about this? Yeah, a couple people pay attention to news? Good. So, Secret Service uncovered this plot in New York City to, disrupt all the telecommunication networks. And they haven't really been forthcoming about what they're talking about or what's going on, but there are some pictures available. And you can actually, if you ever go on Alibaba, AliExpress, you can find these devices right here that they're showing. And these are devices that basically take like 50 to 100 SIM cards each, and they have 50 to 100 cellular modems in them. So basically, it's just like a big bank of cell phones that are able to attack the cellular network. So the way the Secret Service portrays it, you would think it's one of these cell site simulator attacks. Unfortunately, just looking at the data available, I don't think it actually is a cell site simulator attack. This actually looks just like they were going to spam text messages, the same way that you or I could buy a bunch of phones and send out a bunch of text messages. But the attacks you do see that use cell site simulators that are criminal, we got a couple of headline examples here. Any of y'all ever receive those texts that are like, oh my God, you haven't paid your toll, you got to pay us, smishing? You'll get some smishing. So one of the ways they can potentially send out those smishing texts is by using a rogue cell tower. So there was actually a case in France a couple of years ago, lady running around town with one of these cell site simulators in her trunk, sending out all those texts, just as you're driving around. So that's one of the ways criminals like to use this technology. But obviously, we also have some other, Chinese spying. So, Southeast Asia in particular seems to really like cell site simulators and IMSI catchers. Now, it seems that in that particular area of the world, 2G is still very prevalent. So with about 20% of cell phones still primarily using 2G, from what I understand. So that makes it where those devices are very susceptible to these attacks, and the Chinese love to try to spread their influence in the region, so they like using these devices. Again, it doesn't take rocket scientists to figure out how this information could be useful to them. They go to a diplomat or a foreign office, and they can start intercepting text messages and phone calls going back and forth. Hopefully those people are using better forms of communication, they're more secure, but if they're not, then you potentially got some Chinese spies listening in to all your phone calls. Now, there is actually an even better example recently of how this technology has been used. And y'all may have heard of a little, scuffle going on in Europe recently between Ukraine and Russia. And it turns out the Russians really don't like the Patriot air defense system. So they tracked down some Ukrainians in Germany doing some training on how to use these air defense systems. And their brilliant idea is, okay, well, let's set up some of these cell site simulators near this base where they're training. Then we'll be able to collect those IMSI numbers I talked about and see what cell phones are here at this base training. Then we can take those cell site simulators back to Ukraine or set up other ones in Ukraine, and we can look for those same IMSI numbers. And wherever those IMSI numbers are, we have a rough idea now of where those Patriot air defense systems are. So their brilliant scheme, fortunately in this case did not pan out for them. They were caught. And that's actually how we learned a bunch of information about how these are being used in real life. But as you can imagine, that would have been a very nasty situation in that, if you're ever trying to do any red teaming, maybe you don't have access to a cell site simulator, but that's a kind of attack that you can emulate or think about in any red teaming exercises of, oh, I can track people across locations based on their phone. Now, of course, this technology is not limited to them over there. We wouldn't want to be left out. So ICE and police love using this technology for surveillance, particularly at protests. One of the big ideas with cell site simulators and our knowledge to them up to this point is, oh, well, that dragnet surveillance, perfect for surveilling a protest, right? If I set one of these up near a protest, I know everyone that is there at that protest. Additionally, there was an example of them potentially being used at DNC, Democratic National Convention. Again, similar to kind of the Chinese example of, oh, well, if I can listen into these phone calls of the delegates, maybe I can get some information that I can either use to blackmail people or further influence the election. So, okay, the question is, this technology. It sounds kind of expensive. Maybe only the New York Cities of the world and places like that have this. Unfortunately, that is not the case. So we have the Atlas of Surveillance, thanks to the EFF and some other contributors. And so all these little yellow dots, these represent municipalities which have bought cell site simulators. And these are just the ones we know about. Obviously, there could be a lot more. These are just bits of information we've gotten from things like Freedom of Information Act requests. They do have to solicit bids for these devices when they want to buy them, etc. So there are bits and pieces that have leaked out over the years. And if you're anything like me, I imagine half of you are at this point like, you know what, I'm sick and tired of all this surveillance. Well, why don't I just move out to the wilderness? Well, unfortunately for you, they do have one in Alaska sitting there waiting for you as well. Now, I know half of you are like wanting to flee from surveillance, and the other half of you are like, actually, this is just kind of cool. How do I build one myself? Well, you got a couple of $1,000s burned in a hole in your pocket? You can make one for yourself as well. Kind of a little outside of the scope of my talk today and the conversation today, but there is this project, SRS ran. You need that and a couple $1,000s in SDR, something like the Lime SDR. And you can actually make a 4G, maybe even a 5G cell site simulator yourself. I would be very careful playing around with that because the FCC will not enjoy you playing around with those radio frequencies. Those are licensed radio frequencies, but certainly something you can look into if you want to play around with this more. So, okay. Clearly, we want to detect these things when they're around us. Like I was talking about with the police car, it would be very obvious if a police car is following you around. But these devices are basically invisible to us at this point. There's no clear way to understand where they're being used or how they're being used. And there's a lot of secrecy around them. Some of the news articles I pointed out there have revealed more information recently, but these devices have existed for 20 to 30 years, and you rarely hear them talk about. You hear about Wi-Fi attacks all that more often, but these cellular attacks you don't hear about very frequently. And it's actually so cloaked in secrecy that the Justice Department has completely dropped cases in the past because they would have had to reveal that this technology existed. This is a technology they like to leverage in a legal sense for court cases to start gathering evidence. Maybe you have a hopeless case and you are able to set this up in a place and gather some information. But what they would do is they would use something called parallel construction. That's essentially where they will use one means of gathering evidence to start an investigation, but then they will create an entire separate investigation using the knowledge they gathered already, but using different means of gathering that information. So they create a parallel case where they never use cell site simulators. And that will be the one that they actually present in court. Because, again, because of disclosures in court, they would have to reveal, oh, hey, we use this super expensive $1 million cell site simulator to collect all this information on you. So even still, they're very shrouded in secrecy due to that. In fact, I was talking about the Stingray Harris Corporation, loose-lipped ships. Well, the police were so loose-lipped about some of these technologies that Harris Corporation just was like, you know what, actually, we're not even going to sell these to you anymore. We're only going to sell these to three-letter agencies and the military. And also, there are technical barriers to detecting these devices. There have been some earlier attempts with apps like Snoop Snitch, but those apps would require rooted devices. So not everyone wants to root their device to have an Android app on it. Not everyone's capable of doing that. Also, there have been attempts with SDRs, but as I mentioned with setting up your own base station or rogue cell tower, SDRs can be a little expensive. You can get some cheap passive SDRs that can't transmit for fairly cheap. But if you are going to try to get an SDR that's transmit capable, you're getting into hundreds of dollars there, kind of minimum. And then also there's this big distinction too. Stingray, 2G technology. A lot of that research previously, Snoop Snitch in particular, is looking only at those 2G attacks. But as many of y'all are familiar with, 2G not really common in the US anymore. And there are much more modern attacks using LTE and 5G. So a lot of these previous attempts on tracking this technology are basically looking for historical attacks which are just probably not performed all that much anymore, maybe unless you're Southeast Asia and you got some Chinese spies coming after you. And so what this results in is this situation where most of the research community, much of the security community, is completely blind about this technology even existing, or if they know about it existing, they certainly don't fully understand the capabilities. And that results in a scenario where you have policymakers who are writing laws, writing policies, deciding how this technology is used, completely informed only by lobbyists that are paid by these big manufacturing companies who are producing this technology, right? You don't have anyone there arguing the other side. And I think regardless of where you fall on the privacy security debate and what technology can and should be used to surveil citizens, I think it's a suboptimal situation when you only have one side of an argument and people making laws and policies based on only one side of an argument and not even hearing or understanding the other side or another perspective. So that's where Rayhunter comes in. So Rayhunter is a new project by EFF. When I say new, it's about a year old at this point. Now, the Crocodile Hunter with the SDR, that was a previous attempt by the EFF, but again, I kind of mentioned the limitations there around using an SDR. So the goal with the EFF and Rayhunter was, okay, well, we have the secretive technology. We don't know fully who's using it, where they're using it, how they're using it. Let's try to rip the Band-Aid off here and kind of figure out what's going on. So how do we solve some of those kind of problems I was talking about? Well, if we use some commercially available hotspots, makes it pretty cheap and affordable, then you can root a little device like this. You don't have to root your primary phone if you don't feel comfortable with that. Additionally, I can root a bunch of these devices, hand them out, and so now my non-technical friends can help figure out, hey, where are these cell site simulators set up? How are they being used in a way that, normally I'm not going to be able to coach my friend through rooting an Android phone, using an app, and all of that. Additionally, it's not just one or two mobile hotspots that can be used to detect these rogue cell towers. Basically, any mobile hotspot or phone, for that matter, using a Qualcomm modem that supports this dev diag command can be used with Rayhunter. So it's written in Rust, so it's memory safe and hip and cool. But at the end of the day, It's basically a program that you can run on these hotspots. They'll give you a simple, green good, red bad. There's a cell site simulator nearby. So now you've gone from just walking around living your life, never knowing if you're under active attack, to potentially, having a device on you that you can check out periodically and be like, oh, this is green. There's no cell site simulators around here yet. So, really trying to unveil that curtain and figure out, are we encountering cell site simulators on a daily basis? Are these things that'll pop up in your life once a month, once a year? Are they at protests? Are they not at protests? And again, making it accessible to people that are not technical. There are journalists or other activists who would be interested in this technology, but may not feel comfortable using it. So it's been made very accessible thanks to EFF. And of course, for those of us that are a little more technical, it's logging PCAP files. So it can take those PCAP files, we can use Wireshark or something to kind of investigate these communications going on back and forth between the mobile hotspot and the tower. And that's how it's able to detect these attacks, by looking at those management frames going back and forth. We're looking for key indicators that the tower we're talking to is not legitimate. Some of those things that I was discussing before, like if I'm in the US and the tower is saying the only service it has is 2G, that's pretty suspect, because 2G isn't really used in the US. So I was talking about the hotspots capable of being used. Now, I would love to tell you that there's one ring to rule them all. This sort of is, but due to the way that mobile frequencies work, there's multiple different frequencies. Some of them are used some places, some of them are used other places. So if you're in the Americas and you're trying to detect a rogue cell tower, what you want is this Orbic device, which is the primary device this project was developed on and developed for. Relatively affordable, easy to find on eBay as well. But if you're going to Europe or Africa, you need a completely separate device, because that Orbic does not, unfortunately, work on the frequencies that are run over there. So then you need a TP-Link device. Again, they're both using those Qualcomm modems, but just support different frequency bands. Now, if you really are a world traveler or a super nerd, you might know of some little device called the Pine phone. Anyone have a Pine phone? Okay, you actually have a Pine phone. Okay, well, you're in luck. Basically, the Pine phone can run Rayhunter. It's a little weird because basically the Rayhunter part is running on just the modem chip, so it's not actually running on the phone per se. So you kind of have to use a remote connection into another physical device on your phone. It's a little weird, but it works. So, I mean, if you're already running a Pine phone, then you've already made those life decisions that that's what you're dedicated to. But yeah, question.
So what covers the purple?
So the purple would be covered by the Pine phone. There are a couple of other, so the Pine phone covers all the world. It's just a little weird to run. There are other mobile hotspots that can be used, but it's one of those situations where it's more community support needed, more finding the right mobile hotspots that can support that dev diag command and be used. But yeah, if you're going over to Asia, I would definitely, and you're concerned about cell site simulators, I would get the Pine phone. Kind of the progression here is Orbic, really cheap, easy to get here in the US. TP-Link, it's a bit of a pain to get here in the US because it doesn't support US frequency bands. So it's more expensive, and the best way I can find to get it is basically going on like the eBays and eBay equivalents in Africa and Europe, and then get one. You can't get one here. They're not too bad, but it's something that you would need to be aware of if you're traveling internationally. So, okay, enough rambling, Michael. Let's get in the meat and potatoes. What are the findings? It's been going on a year. Surely we've had some interesting findings. Well, the first one, surprise Pikachu face here, there are no detections at protests. And these things have been around some pretty major protests, no King's Day protests, etc. So it seems from early findings that, that original hypothesis that we had that, okay, well, these are going to be super prevalent on all these protests and they're using it for mass surveillance in that way. Again, it's just a single point in time data point, but at this point, it does not seem that they're being used in any large numbers at any major protests around the US. Now, that does not mean that they're not surveilling you at the protests. It just suggests that they're using potentially other means to surveil you at these protests. So that's where they can get into geofence warrants and other technology. Say they go to a mobile cell phone provider, T-Mobile, Verizon, others, and they'll say, okay, well, within these geographic coordinates, draw a box or something, give us all the cell phones that were in that area from noon to 5 o'clock on Saturday, and the telco provider and its infinite helpfulness will be like, sure, yes, let me give you that information. There are other technologies as well, license plate readers, etc., that we know are being used. So it's likely that they're primarily relying on those other surveillance technologies to surveil protests. Now, we do have other positive detections that have been found over the past year. One of them was kind of a random coffee shop in Chicago. Kind of reading the tea leaves here and kind of projecting from the information we had available to us, it was one of those transitory setups where a guy was at the coffee shop, suddenly cell site simulator pops up, he's been there before, it's not been there, comes back up a couple of days later, it's not there. So one of the ways that we believe cell site simulators are used by police in particular and SWAT teams is, verifying a target is in a building before they serve a search warrant. If you're about to hit a building with a search warrant, you want to know the person you're looking for is in that building. So it's potentially possible that they were doing something like that. Additionally, trying to figure out who is in a building in particular. The other one is one that probably most of y'all have passed through at some point in your life if you've lived in the Northeast here. Anyone want to take a guess at where there was one in New York? I'll give you a hint. Transit hub of Penn Station, yes. Yeah, so Penn Station's a bit of a weird one. So basically, anytime I go through there, I get IMSI detector detection. I'll talk about that more in a moment, but specifically for this detection, it did hit on multiple signals, which suggests that there was a cell site simulator there. I don't know why they would want one in Penn Station. My best guess is that they're looking for things like suspicious behavior, human trafficking, etc. By, potentially monitoring an area like that over time. You could monitor people who are trying to avoid going through airports, etc., or establish patterns of life of criminals or whoever you're looking for. A couple other detections are some over in the Mediterranean Turks and Caicos Islands. This one's actually on GitHub, so I know some of y'all are nerdy people who are going to be like, actually, my idea of a good time on a Saturday afternoon is digging through a bunch of Wireshark files. So there you go. There's the QR code for you. But that'll take you to a GitHub page where there's some of these Wireshark, log PCAP files, and that apparently was so suspicious it was hitting all of the key indicators of compromise that we have for these types of cell site simulators and devices. So lots of fun stuff to look through there. Last one I touch on is, I was going to a conference in Sweden recently, passing through Frankfurt Airport, and I also got a detection there. Turns out that one probably false positive, something to be aware of. Places that you would not think about having 2G service still have 2G service. Turns out Germany still has 2G service, even though that's very suspicious for reasons that we discussed earlier. So beautiful interface. This is the interface that comes up when we actually connect to a Rayhunter device. And here you can kind of see some of these detections I've been talking about. So this is the one I got going through Penn Station, for example. Alerting on the detection where it's trying to collect IMSI numbers. Basically, if you've ever seen the the Simpsons wallet inspector kind of meme, that's essentially what these rogue cell towers would be doing. They'd be going to every device that connects to them and say, "Give me your IMSI number," and then they'd be like, "Okay, thanks," run off, and no connection for you. So these devices are just there collecting IMSI numbers and then dropping connections. Very suspicious behavior. Normal cell tower, in theory, shouldn't be doing that. But this has been the problem child detection. If you get this detection, this is the one that's most likely to be a false positive. If you see it just like this, I'd give it 50-50 or better that it's a false positive. How you know you've definitely seen a rogue cell tower is if you get multiple detections here. So you can kind of see some of the other analytics it's looking for here. But if you start seeing multiple different things being flagged, that's how you have a very strong indicator that you have legitimately seen rogue cell tower. But of course, EFF is collecting all these PCAP files, aggregating them, and trying to analyze them so we can have a better idea of is this a legitimate thing or not? Is it false positive, etc. So you don't have to worry about your own skills to look at PCAP files. Again, this is something intended to be able to hand to a journalist and say, hey, take this. If you ever see it turn red, go here, download file, and send it to us. And this one here is the one I was pointing out in Frankfurt Airport in Germany. Again, looks very spooky. That SIB downgrade, basically kind of that attack I was describing before, where it's saying, hey, I got service for you, but it's just 2G. Hope you like that. And so, again, very suspicious, but it's one of those things where if you do get into Rayhunter and you do get into looking at these detections, you want to see more than just one type of detection to be very sure that what you're looking at is a rogue cell tower. So, okay, very spooky stuff. What can I do about it? How can I protect myself? Well, there's multiple different aspects. So before you ever get near a rogue cell tower, learning some signals intelligence, learning how radios work is definitely a good first step. Doing that and doing some threat modeling. Are you a soccer mom taking your kids to a game? Probably don't need to be that concerned about a rogue cell tower. Are you a soccer mom taking her kids to a soccer game and selling nuclear secrets to the North Koreans or Iran? Okay, maybe you need to be a little more concerned about a rogue cell tower maybe spying on you. And of course, the ultimate protection is you could just go back and pretend you live in the 80s and cell phones just don't exist and not carry a cell phone with you. Probably not practical for everyday purposes, but that would be the ultimate protection from these sorts of attacks. Now, the next thing you can do is kind of change some of your lifestyle aspects of, this is actually one of the rare cases that I would consider a VPN. I know there's lots of ads for VPNs of dubious usefulness, but particularly against 2G downgrade attacks, a VPN could be incredibly valuable. Because I was talking about how 2G attack downgrades the data encryption, but a VPN would bypass that, so you would have encrypted data even if they were successful in downgrading you to a 2G. Additionally, most modern phones support disabling 2G service. If you're traveling overseas a bunch, that may or may not be practical. If you're going into backcountry in these other countries, may be less practical. But for just everyday driving around the US, definitely suggest disabling 2G service on your phone. Not going to notice any impact at all, but it really enhances your security. And then additionally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Signal. You've probably seen it in the news recently, but it also is a good way to encrypt your calls and text messages as long as other people are using Signal. But again, that would help secure you against 2G downgrade attacks and some of these other attacks because you're no longer using insecure, bad, old encryption. Now, what can I do if I got one of these Rayhunters and it suddenly turns red? I'm in the moment. I got a rogue cell tower near me. I messed up. I didn't do any of that before the hand work. Well, the first thing you should do is turn off your cell phone, cellular Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, etc. That'll really help protect things. Put it in airplane mode. But the caveat I always say there is that our phones lie to us sometimes. And, as y'all may be familiar, when you tell your phone, go in airplane mode, turn everything off, it doesn't always do exactly what it says on the tin, and sometimes it's still communicating. So if you did see a rogue cell tower, I would strongly suggest getting out of there, but also at a minimum, turn your phone off. You can also steal a bit from the police's handbook. Anyone know what happens to your cellular device when you get arrested? Any guesses? Yeah. Yes. But before that, what they'll do is they'll put it in a Faraday bag or a Faraday box because essentially what they're afraid you'll do is you'll wipe it remotely. Send some command, do something, say, oh, I lost my iPhone, delete everything before they get to image it. So you can take a little from that handbook and you get a little Faraday bag, or you can just get a bunch of aluminum foil and wrap it around your phone. It'll effectively work the same thing. But basically, put a bunch of metal around your phone and then the radio signals can't go anywhere. Now, right of boom. After you've been through a cell site simulator, not much you can do. The only thing you might be able to do that might be helpful is swapping your SIMs. That would essentially change your IMSI number. So that could potentially be helpful. But frankly, already at that point, they have at least your old IMSI number. They would be able to go to a telco provider, et cetera, and collect a bunch more information on you and your device based on that. But if you did change your IMSI number, at least going forward, they wouldn't be able to track you based on that IMSI number. So again, in the Ukraine example, they were trying to track them back in Ukraine using that IMSI number. If they had changed it between going to the base in Germany and going back to Ukraine, that could have been very helpful. It would have broken the whole plot there as well. So if you're going to Germany and training on Patriot air defense missile systems, maybe swap your SIM after. And of course, the ultimate protection as well, burner phone. If you have the budget for that, you can easily get, relatively affordable, like $50 to $100, $150 Android phone, etc., that you use a burner device, basically a device that you use only for a limited period of time, then get rid of, and again, that would help protect you against getting tracked over time. So, Rayhunter is a really cool project, but it's still only a year old. There's still a lot of opportunity for growth and improvement in the project. Some of the things that we're looking at adding are things like GPS. So we have those beautiful PCAP files. We could do some awesome ore driving, but there's no GPS in these devices. So connecting or making an app that connects to your phone and gets to GPS coordinates from your phone, or adding a way to connect GPS directly to this, definitely an area for improvement. So if anyone's looking for some fun projects to work on and you like GPS and war driving, I got an opportunity for you. And then on the other side of the war driving as well is, I was talking about part of the goal of the Rayhunter project is to figure out, where these are being used. We have that beautiful atlas of surveillance, but that's just saying, okay, well, this city owns this device. It doesn't tell you, oh, there's a cell site simulator, on this street or this building. So there's a lot of opportunity to make some of these devices, take Rayhunter around, do the normal war driving you might do already, but then also do some cellular war driving and detect where some of these rogue cell towers might be. And then also building a better map and database of this information. So, EFF has collected this information. They put out an article a couple weeks ago about some of these detections that we found in the first year or so, but having a better map or database that can be publicly available about where these devices are, so that we can know, and I can be like, oh yeah, okay, it's at Penn Station. I maybe don't want to go through Penn Station. Well, that doesn't really currently exist, so definitely something we could use help on. One of the concerns there is just around PII, personally identifiable information. There is some PII in these PCAP files, specifically the IMSI number of the device. So some things to work through there. Also, routing more devices. I talked about that any device running a Qualcomm modem that supports that dev diag command. So finding more devices, you're asking about the purple area, right, on the map, Asia region, finding more mobile hotspots or other devices that'll work there and routing them. And then also testing against cell site simulators. I talked about some GitHub projects that let you build your own, but finding more commercially available cell site simulators to test against so we can actually know, are the parameters that we're looking for the same attacks that these devices are actually using? So want to make some acknowledgments here to all the work that EFF and the crew has done. Also, little conference down in Atlanta, Counter Spy Conference. They had some really good talks on understanding MC catchers and building Stingray Rayhunters. And then also there was a nice talk at DEF CON recently about building open source cell site simulators. So if you want to get involved, I have a number of the Orbic hotspots with me today. If you want to buy one, you can also go on eBay and get a number of them. Strongly encourage you basically to go get one of these devices. They're not really that expensive. Go out and just live your life normally. If you get a detection, send it to the EFF. At a minimum, that would be super helpful. If you want to do proactive, like war driving, that would be even super helpful. But at a minimum, just contributing to the project in any which way you can would be great. And I think we have a couple of minutes for questions now. So yeah, any questions?
So when there's degradation back down to 2G,
Mm-hmm.
if the handset has an application or settings to enforce a DNS resolution for the data portion that overrides the cell tower's default DNS,
Yeah.
will the cell tower simulator cancel that out, or will it route the DNS through where the handset says
Right.
through the simulator by default?
Yeah, and repeating the question for the stream, basically the question is about if during a 2G downgrade attack, if they're potentially trying to redirect DNS, et cetera, and you have some settings on your phone to route DNS a certain way with whatever they're doing. It depends, like if you're using DNSSEC and DNS over HTTPS, in theory you should be more secure. But if you're just using like standard DNS, because they're performing a man-in-the-middle attack, they could route that traffic wherever they want to, or pretend it's coming from wherever they want it to. If you were using more secure stuff, that's possible. Frankly, from what we've seen so far, I would not be hyper concerned about that. Again, unless your threat model says, okay, if I'm working at Lockheed Martin on a super secret, fighter jet, and I, for whatever reason, have CUI on my cell phone, and I'm using that on my cell phone, then maybe I would be more concerned about that. If you're just going about your daily life, I would not be that concerned about that. That being said, using some more secure DNS. Shout out to Pi-hole. If y'all like setting up Pi-hole on your home network, I would definitely suggest that, enabling DNS over HTTPS, etc. Any other questions? Yeah.
With the prevalence of eSIMs, does that change the nature of this attack at all? If you have a phone that doesn't have a physical SIM card?
Basically, the question is if you have an eSIM versus a physical SIM, does that change anything? No. The only thing that might change is it makes it easier to change your SIM card, so that could change your IMSI number. Again, so I was kind of talking about changing your IMSI number could be helpful. It's not the end-all, be-all, but certainly would be helpful, but just eSIM versus regular SIM, no difference, as far as I'm aware. Yeah?
On your green, yellow, red slide, you had, if you counter one of these things, you're supposed to turn off, obviously, cellular, but also the Wi-Fi to lose your GPS.
Yeah.
Like, is there a reason for the Wi-Fi to lose your GPS at all?
Just because you're physically close to this device, and while it's possible that these devices are being used in isolation, it's also strongly possible that they're using some of the Wi-Fi attacks I was talking about, Wi-Fi pineapple, etc. Also, one of the attacks that can happen is if you have your GPS on, they can use some attacks on the cellular protocol to basically demand your location from your phone. And so if you didn't have GPS enabled, then they would only be able to get the coarse location of, okay, well, you're within several hundred yards of this rogue cell tower. They wouldn't be able to get the precise, 3-meter GPS location of you are in this corner of this room in that building. And then, yeah, the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, it's just, if they're tracking you through cellular, it's more than likely that they're also attempting other techniques as well. So that's why I would add that precaution. I think there was another question back here.
You answered my question in the last one.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions? Yeah.
You were talking about common places where they were expected and found, protests, etc. What about stadiums?
Yes. So I don't know of any evidence saying anything about stadiums, but just from my suspicions, that could be the sorts of device or the sorts of places you might deploy these devices. Again, maybe you're aware of certain cell phones that are owned by terrorists or something like that. You might do that. Or again, you might be trying to establish patterns of life. Hey, is there like some device that's been coming around here for days after days, like that doesn't belong to a contractor or someone? Whether or not it's used like that, I don't have any strong evidence to say either way, but I could definitely see a use case in that sort of scenario. I'll jump over here. Yeah.
Me?
Yep, yeah.
I imagine that the PCAPs that are coming from Stingray are a lot different than normal network TCP packets. So is there a filter for Wireshark that you can get and import into your Wireshark so that you can filter out all the other stuff and really zone in on what's important?
Yeah, so there's the PCAP and then the QMDL. So the PCAP file is actually already filtered. So that QMDL file is all the packets coming through on the cellular band, and then the PCAP file is just the looking at the management packets going back and forth that Rayhunter thinks is interesting. As far as in Wireshark, I think it's just automatically just going to look at those packets that you give it. I don't know that you need anything else, but honestly, I'm not the one that dives into Wireshark all that much. But I think if you just download that PCAP file and open it up in Wireshark, you should be off to the races.
Right. I'm talking about new PCAP files that you collect yourself.
Yeah. So, for instance, if I connect to the device, that's a PCAP file I've collected myself. That's automatically going to be filtered.
Oh, so
Yeah.
the
The physical device.
physical device already filtered?
Yeah, as long as it's running Rayhunter. Yeah. I'll jump over here.
Do you need a SIM card in the hotspot? Does it have to be active?
Having a SIM card is, yes. It does not have to be active, as far as we can tell, as long as it has some data to give to the cell tower. These rogue cell towers are not connected back to Verizon or T-Mobile, so they have no way to verify the data anyway. So as long as there's a SIM card in there, so it looks like there's data, it should be good. So like for all the ones that I have available today, like they all have SIM cards in them. Their Verizon SIM cards are not active, but they'll work on all the carriers in the US, etc. Yes?
So you get your Orbit today,
Mhm.
you go to the GitHub, you do the installation. How do you test? You have to
Right.
fly
So that's where, I was talking about that talk by Ronald Broberg, that open source cellular test bed, because that was actually his question, right? Is like, well, how do I test these things? Unfortunately, unless you want to, spend $2,000 building your own, there's not a tried and true way to test it. It's kind of just go around your life and see if you get a detection. That being said, if you do go through Penn Station or something, you will get the detection. A lot of the ones I have, I've already pre-flashed and I carry around with me all the time. So some of them have detections on them already. But yeah, that is one of those areas, for improvement and growth in the project, is getting a more tried and true, affordable way to do some testing, etc. Let me know when I should stop questions.
This is my first day.
Okay, okay. Any more quick questions? I think we're almost out of time.
But he's good till top of the hour, right?
We try to end.
Okay. And that's all. Thank you for coming to the talk today. I'll be out here if you want to get an Orbic. I also have some stickers for those of you that are interested. Thanks.